Bible prophecy is being fulfilled in the land of Israel. What the prophets spoke 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years, 2,600 years ago, are now coming to pass. That Israel would be scattered throughout the nations of the earth and then brought back in the last days. Let me take everyone to Jeremiah. I'm going to read right out of the King James here. Everyone out there can follow along with me. I always recommend the King James. It'll always be my favorite English version of the Bible. We're going to start Jeremiah 16, verse 14. Therefore, and whenever you see the word therefore, what's the therefore? Therefore, it's because of the preceding context of Israel being scattered through the nations of the world. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, as it says, I'm reading King James. The days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands whither he had driven them, and I will bring them again into the land that I gave unto their fathers. This is Moses' prophecy now being repeated for the last days. How do you see that? Living in the land of Israel.
I got to tell you, Michael, this is one of the prophecies that I can look back over my life, and I've seen it fulfilled literally. When I was a kid, we very young, we would talk about, every year we do the Passover Seder, and we're remembering the Exodus from Egypt. This was the big thing. God took us out of Egypt. But in the 1980s, when I was very young, so the big movement in the Jewish world in America was, this was the motto, Free Soviet Jewry. There were over 1 million Jews living in the Soviet Union, and they were being persecuted. You saw this banner on the front of synagogues all over America. It was a Star of David wrapped in chain. And the motto there was Free Soviet Jewry. And a few years ago, I was reminded of what a big deal this was. I heard a lecture a few years ago, and it was recorded in 1986. And they were asking this activist in the Free Soviet Jewry movement, they said, how is this going to end? How are these Jews ever going to be freed from the Soviet Union? And you have to understand, for example, Nathan Sharansky, who was like one of the symbols of the movement, he officially requested to be let out of the Soviet Union and be allowed to go to Israel. And they said, if we let out the Jews, they called it a brain drain. They said, we need you. We got to hold on to you guys. You're our professors, you're our intellectuals, and other things too. And he was thrown in prison. And he was in prison for decades. And they called him a refusenik. He was refused leaving the Soviet Union. They had such a wonderful, idyllic system you couldn't leave. And so they asked this activist, how will this ever end in 1986? And at the time he said, this will be a generations-long struggle.
Generations long.
He said, we will be fighting this. Our great-grandchildren will be fighting this battle to free our people. And maybe if we get really successful, we'll get a few dozen out one year and a few hundred out another year. And over time, we'll eventually free our people from the chains of the Soviet Union, of communism. And then in 1991, the Soviet Union fell. And 1.1 million Jews came to Israel.
1.1 million.
1.1 million came to Israel. Hundreds of thousands more went to Western countries. And the chains fell away. And imagine that 5 years earlier in 1986, the greatest experts in the world said this will be, our great-grandchildren will be fighting to free these people. And today they're free. It's a fact of history that we can look back on now. And I read this here in verse 15, and it says, they're no longer going to say, as Yehovah lives, that's what it says in the Hebrew, as Yehovah lives, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, but as Yehovah lives, who brought the children of Israel from the land of the north. Look on the map, Michael. What's north of Israel? The Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, today Russia and Ukraine and Belarus and all those countries. Jeremiah was talking literally about what happened in the 1990s, and it's continuing to happen. He talked about in all the lands where I have cast them out there, and I will return them to their land that I gave to their fathers. It's literally happened in the last 70 years, what Jeremiah spoke about 2,600 years ago. Back in 1986, when this activist for Free Soviet Jewry is talking about this, one of the things he said, we'll never overpower the Soviet Union. They have thermonuclear weapons. We can't force them to let them go. They'll never let them go. And so this will be generations where we get a few dozen out here and a few hundred there. And they just left. I mean, it's fulfillment of prophecy. When I was 12 years old and read this prophecy, it made no sense. What's he talking about? And then within my lifetime, these words were fulfilled. They're fact now. It's incredible. Jeremiah spoke the truth. His prophecy has been fulfilled in our lifetimes and continues to be fulfilled. He's returning to the people to the land of their fathers.
And they came into a land that was already prepared. It was already set up.